Come on. Come on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Betty.
Okay, Wendy, I've started the live streaming, but it's not, it shows, it'll come up pretty quick here when the meeting
Okay.
starts. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, my office is piling up again.
Uh-oh. Is Bob? Oh no, Bob was gonna be a bit late this morning.
Well, it's always something. I tried to go online and to get my homeowner grant. They've
Yeah.
got the wrong address on my
Oh,
photo.
no.
So,
Oh,
so,
geez.
so you don't have to pay your taxes.
Maybe.
I
Only
doubt
it
that.
Right? If only it worked like that.
Yeah.
So we're waiting for Director Bodner
And Shannon?
and Shannon, and Director Beckett will be a little bit late.
That's right.
Mike, do you get a chill down your back from those mountains with all the snow in them behind you?
I do. It's actually the air conditioning is working really well right now. It feels just like it's blowing off the mountains. That way you don't see how messy my office is right now.
Did you get all your haying done, Tanya?
Silaging, yes.
Oh, silage. Oh,
Yeah.
haylage.
Woo, yeah. But all the guns are running with all the liquid
Poo.
goodies from the cows and getting all the grass going again for hay when we get some hot weather.
Good news.
Yeah.
Shall we start or?
Yes, Director Beckett's gonna be late, so I think everyone's here.
Okay, so I'll call this Electoral Area Directors Committee meeting to order at 10 o'clock. Can I have, just to recognize that we are on the traditional territories of the Sishat and Hupachesit at this time. And I'm not sure where everybody else is. You could be within our area or without. So we have an agenda. Can we have approval of the agenda, please?
So approved.
Seconder,
Second.
all in favor? Thank you. I'll just call if you're opposed to something from going forward. So we have minutes of the electoral area director committee meeting from March 3rd. Do I have adoption? Motion to adopt? Can you say your name, please?
Cal Roberts.
Thank you. Seconder,
Tanya
Thank
Shannon
you.
will second.
anyone opposed, or is there any corrections? Hearing none, then that's carried. No petitions or delegations that I know of, not on their agenda. No correspondence for action, so request for decision of bylaw. So it's the Community Works Funds Project 2020. So who will be?
I can take
presenting?
that.
Thank you.
That's Terry, you're welcome. So the EA committee recommended a Community Works Fund policy last year that the board then adopted. But then we changed up our budgeting process in 2020 to a format that I think worked really well for the board and staff in having the discussions regarding the budget. But we needed to update the Community Works Fund policy to show that the entire board is going to see these projects in advance of the EA committee. So we've reworded the policy slightly to say that the EA committee will still get to see them. It'll just be that the board, as part of the budget presentation, will see them first, and then we'll have an EA committee meeting shortly after that, which we will actually put on a separate RFD each year to list out what the new projects are that staff are proposing or that have been included in the draft financial plan. I've also in this RFD just included a summary of the projects that were approved in 2020 for discussion.
Okay, is there any questions or comments at this time? Director McNabb?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with the Community Works project is really maintaining the ability to direct this effectively by the electoral areas. I mean, when we get to a regular board meeting, half the board has no skin in the game, and this is our only opportunity as electoral areas to implement grant monies that are in front of us and put them into work in our individual electoral areas. So I don't want to diminish that in any way. Having the whole board vote on what we're going to do with our money is not something I'm real happy about.
Thank you. Go to Director Roberts.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate that. I think that it's important for individual directors to be able to work within the system and operate off of the available funds that are available to us. Each area has projects, special projects, and so on that they are working on and would like to see completed, and having others that are not, as you mentioned, not have skin in the game participate is actually contravenes, I think, the whole concept of what the Community Works funds are for. The other thing that I wanted to discuss, if I might, just on this, is my understanding that some regional districts, when the Community Works funds come in, they divide them up equally amongst the elected area directors. And I'm wondering where that's at. I mean, each director knows what they need to do within their respective communities. And if the funds are being directed to them or given to them directly to deal with, then I think, it's perhaps something, I don't know if we had ever done this in the past or not, but just food for thought. And I appreciate your comments, John. Thanks.
Mr. Holmes, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to observe that there's sort of a legislative hurdle we can't get around in any way, is that the entire board votes on the financial plan. And this is a component of the financial plan, but what we're trying to accomplish is exactly what Director McNabb was articulating earlier, in that we eventually want to get to a situation where the electoral area directors is providing direction on a longer term plan. So we're going to be a little while to get to that, as mentioned in the report, but there's no escaping that the entire board votes on the entire financial plan. And so I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I think that just everything goes through the board for approval. So I see the community funds, work funds, as part of this committee, and I believe it should be a recommendation from the electoral area directors. So on page 10, it has listed responsibilities and procedures related to this policy as follows. And we could insert as recommended by the electoral area committee. And I think that needs to be a part of this going forward. And I think that would cover the response coming from the electoral area directors, making a recommendation to the board to approve projects that we see fit for these funds going forward. I have one other comment that I'd like to add is at the beginning it states that a deadline of October 31st, I believe, is what was put there. And I think that this could run parallel to our grant and aids. I'm not sure if that would be acceptable, but I think that's a really good timeline so that it's all in place for our budget, very similar to the grant and aids. I'm not sure if staff would approve of that, but I have.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, you're
Sorry, Ms. Fong, and I think Director McNabb had his hand up.
I don't know if I'm
Sure.
muted
So
or
the
not.
way that the
Ms. Fong, thank you.
the way that the policy is kind of written now with this new section is kind of referring to how Director Cote was just talking. So basically, the way we've worded it is that if you want any changes from what has been presented to the board of directors as a whole during the budget presentation, that you would be making recommendations for changes. So it's kind of the opposite, but achieves the same result as what you were talking about, Director Cote, as in recommending what projects you want to proceed. So that's kind of how we have it, is that we would have whatever projects have brought forward, whether those are from community groups that have done applications or whether those are proposals that staff consider good uses of the funding, and they would be included in the draft financial plan. And then when the EA committee reviews it, you would basically just be recommending changes to those. So if there was a project in there that you identified that you didn't want to support, then you'd be recommending a change to remove that project in the current year. Or if there was a project that staff wasn't recommending but had been presented and you wanted it included, then that would be your opportunity to do that. As for the October 30th, I think it was, deadline, that's just another option to consider. If this committee would really like to see these applications in advance of them going to the draft budget or financial plan presentation, then we need to move that deadline back so that we can accommodate having that EA meeting in advance of the financial plan presentation to the board of directors.
Okay.
That's all from me.
Director McNabb?
So two things. I think that's an appropriate adjustment to this, that we actually discuss these before they go into the budget. I think that would be the sort of the best control measure. So if this says at a meeting shortly after the initial presentation, I would say shortly prior to the initial presentation would be what I would like it to say. The other thing that I'd just like to comment on, and it's a little bit of latitude from all of this, but I really think that we need to focus on funding through the gas tax programs, projects that can be accomplished quickly at this point. So if we've got things that we can look at and they can be accomplished in 2020 or early 2021, we really need to be focusing on that as far as recovery in our community is concerned, and utilizing these monies for what they were designed to do for the benefit of our areas. So the stuff that sits on the shelf for years and years and years isn't really doing us any good at all in any of our areas. So we can always sort of highlight those projects and say, okay, when this comes up again, we'll fund it in principle. But we need to look at the stuff that we can get done and benefit the community as quickly as we possibly can coming up in this next segment that we're doing right now. So just with regards to that early part, is that doable, Ms. Fong?
I would say then we're pushing it to the fall, that we're going to be going with a October or early November deadline to have this EA committee meeting in the fall. It is quite chaotic in January and early February, and a huge push to get that entire budget package completed, and to add an extra EA meeting during that time, I think would be incredibly challenging for staff. So if we could move the deadline to October 31st and then do a meeting in November to talk about them in advance of the budgeting process, that would work. Otherwise, I think it would be a challenge. I don't know if Mr. Holmes wants to add anything to that, but.
Well, we do have a structural problem with that the year-end closure happens and then preparation for audit at the same time. Municipalities have a little bit better leeway in that their financial planning doesn't have to be done until the May 15th deadline, but we have a March 31st deadline, which compresses all of those activities. So it's just the reality, unfortunately, that it is quite a frenzy. So I agree completely with Ms. Fong.
Is there anyone else that has any questions or comments? Director Shannon?
Thank you. I like the idea of the October one, so then that's my understanding on the agenda. That's the recommendation on page 8, just for clarification.
No, that's just an option considered. If you didn't like the initial recommendation, which is at the top of page 7, then an option to consider, this was kind of an alternative, would be to recommend that the timeline section is changed to include a date of October 31st.
Okay.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so is there any
But-
further discussion on this? Director McNabb?
So where I was actually reading was on page 10. I think it's 10. Yeah, it's a highlighted portion of that. So what I was reading was at a meeting shortly after the initial presentation. And I was.
Yes, so this is what we're recommending, but if you would like to go with the meeting in advance, then the change will actually occur in that section right below that says timelines, and it would actually be changed to October 15th at that point. And then at the next board of directors meeting, I can show you what the old language was regarding it going to an EA committee first for recommendation before it comes to the board.
Is that clear?
Well, I mean, I think it does what we need to do. If we have a meeting in October, we will basically be just talking about the things that we want to put this towards. If we get the budget and these things are in the budget or not the way we want to, we'll have a meeting shortly after the initial presentation and redirect those as we possibly can. And I think it'll work. So I would move the recommendation.
Hello, Mr. Beckett, you've joined us. I would actually like to make a change on that recommendation on page 10 to add a few words on a few of the in each of the points. Develop eligible proposal to present during the financial planning process, and then add as recommended by the electoral area committee. And then further, the board of directors shall approve funding of the community works funds projects during the annual financial plan process and any required financial plan amendments as recommended by the electoral area committee. And further, the EA Directors Committee shall provide recommendations for any changes to the proposed projects to the Board of Directors in advance of the adoption of the final financial plan as directed by the financial or the Electoral Area Directors Committee. I'm not sure if that covers so that it doesn't just go to the board and the board take over the community works funds from the electoral area directors.
So the current policy, can I just add what the current policy actually reads? Because this is just a draft of the revised policy that you have. But the current policy reads, the EA directors shall review and evaluate all proposed projects and initiatives that meet the eligible criteria and guidelines of the Community Works Fund and recommend to the Board of Directors approval of the chosen projects, is how it reads right now. And then that Board of Directors section is the same as what has been presented.
So that would cover then that it's driven by direction recommendations coming from the electoral area committee?
I think that, yeah, it's basically saying that that the EA directors will recommend to the Board of Directors the approval of the chosen projects.
Just trying to correct, because last budget, something was presented at the very last minute and the electoral area directors had already discussed it. And the board, it went to the board and the board made the decision. It wasn't what had come from the electoral area directors. So I want to make sure that there's a correction made there for going forward. Mr. Holmes?
Madam Chair, I think that the existing language that isn't in the agenda package that Terry is talking will come as close as we can to achieving that. But just by way of reminder, there's nothing that we can do by policy that the board can't overturn. So the board will, at the end of the day, always get to vote on that. But we do hear you in saying that you want to make it very clear that the Electoral Area Directors Committee, their recommendations on the disposition of these grants are very important and should be heeded.
Great, thanks. Mr. Beckett, Director Beckett, do you have any comments on this?
No, I'm sorry, and I apologize. I joined the meeting late. I've just gotten on.
That's all right. Glad to have you here. Is there anything further from any directors? Hearing none. Director McNabb, you were making a motion. Oh, Ms. Fong, you have something else?
I think that the Director McNabb's intent is not actually to pass the recommendation. He's wanting to pass, I believe, the under options considered, that the Electoral Area Directors Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors amend the timeline section of the Community Work Fund policy to include a date of October 31st of the prior year. I just wanted to clarify that because
That's correct. So that's the motion I moved.
Okay, is there a seconder? Could you say your name, please?
Sorry, Director Roberts, second.
Thank you. Just for anyone that's just listening. So, okay, is there anyone opposed Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, on to our next. So next is reports. Planning Development Department update for rural planning and business inspection services. I imagine Mr. Erg will take over.
Yeah, certainly. If I will run through this one. I just want to note that this is an update that's provided for electoral area director services. So the focus is on the rural planning portion of the planning work, as well as building inspection. And if everybody's in agreement, what I propose is I'll just run through all of the different sections. I think I've got like 13 different sort of notes here to run through, and then go through questions if that works for everybody. Okay. So I just want to note at the beginning that this isn't a report from me. It's a report from the entire planning and building inspection team. Everybody had their input and on the various sections of the report. And I just want to start with the basically planning applications. So just to note that and I'm just scrolling down to get to my report in the agenda. The planning applications, we've continued to receive applications for development, so various zoning, OCP, development permits, temporary use permits, etc. So we have received 34 applications so far in 2020, and I just would note that they're continuing to come in. The other week we had 6 applications come in. The next section is just an update on the GIS and the mapping component. I think as everybody's aware, we've recently hired Amy Wilson, who's responsible for most of this. And our goal for this year has been to convert a lot of our data to a GIS format. So it's it's called Esri. And this is in addition to the support that's provided to the organization through the regular mapping and website support. And Amy's has provided an overview of where we're at with various spatial data or the GIS components of our mapping and what we're doing. And we are focusing, she is focusing on getting the new OCP updates and zoning bylaw update so that it's in a new format. Will work better on both with our city view, our internal data, as well as the website and interactive, the way it'll interact with the public on our website. So that's that section. And then going down to building inspection. Building inspection has been very active through the whole time, like since March. We have continued to have building permits come in, continue to do our work. There's been some slight adjustments to manage with COVID. And we've developed a policy around what inspections, or how we'll do inspections. So, for example, we'll do remote inspections, so using a phone if it's possible. Engineers are sometimes involved. We are still doing on-site inspections and have been. The only adjustment we've made is that we haven't been doing inspections of buildings that are occupied by somebody. So if somebody's living in the home, we're not going in and doing those inspections. But again, the work's continuing. I just want to note that we have issued 45 permits this year in 2020 and have received 65 permits to date. So again, it's looking to continue to be a very busy year. A couple of projects that we're hoping to get to this year. One is a request from the Agriculture Development Committee to amend the building bylaw to exempt low occupancy agricultural buildings. So some areas do this, and we'll be hopefully bring a report to the board soon about that. And then the other one is just a review of the fee schedule, and which is something that the board had asked us to do for this year. And then I included the agricultural initiatives. I just want to note, like, the ag support work that we do is funded through regional planning and is for the entire the entire regional district. So municipalities also participate in this, but this applies or has a big impact on the rural areas. And I just wanted to note that just wanted to include this update, and then the impacts for the entire regional district. And one of the highlights is the food hub initiative that's come into being built on the waterfront in Port Alberni, but it's including it's going to have some some processing for like vegetable and fruit products, as well as some meat components, so the cutting up, not necessarily the slaughter, as well as seafood. There's a big seafood component to this, which is really interesting and has really fit into the agriculture work that we've done. The next update is just on the burning bylaw. So there's two bylaws, one for wood stoves and one for open burning that we've been working through. The board had directed staff to go back and get some public engagement. So we're working on that, and as well as we've had this sent out to other agencies just to get some feedback. And we will be reporting back to the board on that this summer. The bylaw enforcement, bylaw notice enforcement, so the ticketing bylaw that we have. So we are preparing the notifications for to go out into the newspapers, sending letters where people we have active zoning bylaw infractions. And then the next report here deals with this, so I won't talk about this one too much. We can go into it a little bit more in the next staff report. Just a brief update on the zoning bylaw and community plan updates that are required to support the zoning bylaw update. So we're getting the pre-referrals out, and I just, when I was reading this, we as staff understand what that means. I just wanted to clarify that what we do as part of a big project like this is we send it out to all of the referral agencies and First Nations and get their input, so that we can have a more finalized or bylaw that everybody's supportive of, the public and agencies, before it comes to the board for first reading. So that's what's intended to be meant by pre-referral. It's actually the big referral happens now, and then any major changes can be made prior to the board considering first reading. And I think that's all I had on that one. The Alberni Age Friendly Plan. So this is on the board agenda, and I definitely don't want to steal Amy Anaka's thunder, so I will let her present that to the board. Just it's an important project that we're working on. Wanted to include that so that everybody's aware of it. The housing needs report. So as you may recall, we have received a grant of approximately $86,000 to complete the housing needs reports for all of the electoral areas. So this is something that is we're required to do, whether we get a grant or not, by the province requires us to do this. So it's great that we have this funding to help support that project. Just sort of the order, we have some very initial or very preliminary work with Bamfield. So the intent is to start with Bamfield, then work on the Alberni Valley. We're going to do some coordination with the city of Port Alberni on that, and then finishing up with Long Beach. And the reason for the order of that is we've been working with Tofino and Ucluelet, and they're applying for some grant funding. We want to coordinate the work on the West Coast. All three of them working together. Short-term vacation rentals. So we're also continuing to work with short-term vacation rentals, and this is something that I would like some board feedback or confirmation that we're taking the right approach here. So we have not run any temporary use permit applications for the last 3 months since COVID started. We have some applications that we have here that we're working on that I think in general would be supportable, and didn't feel as staff we didn't feel that was appropriate to bring forward sort of while there was a travel advisory on, or people being advised not to travel to communities, and we certainly looking to get some feedback on that. As the province is moving towards into phase 2 and towards phase 3, encouraging interprovincial travel and also sort of close to home travel. We have some applicants that want us to bring their applications forward, and it seems to be timely to do that. And also the other thing I wanted to point out with short-term vacation rentals is we have a lot of people that are working towards getting their vacation rental legalized. So we don't anticipate ticketing those people. So the ticketing can apply to the zoning bylaw infractions related to short-term vacation rentals. So if somebody has made an application is getting their building inspection required, or their safety requirements, or working on getting a sewage their sewage assessment done to meet our policy requirements, we're not going to, if they're operating vacation rentals, we're not going to be ticketing them. for those things, unless the board gives us different direction. Just a note on public hearings, just that we have a number of applications that are going to be requiring public hearings. We are scheduling 2 for Beaver Creek in July. It will be on the 13th and 14th, and those ads and things will be going out, and just doing some of the back end work that we need to do to change our advertisements and make sure that we have a smooth process for doing this sort of with staff and the chair of the meeting in person, and the public and the applicants coming in electronically through Zoom. So bylaw enforcement, we continue to receive complaints. I would note that we haven't received as many official complaints. In talking to Jason, he is certainly receiving a lot of phone calls about things, and we have a lot of active files that sort of have some history we've been working with for a long time. And then also part of the bylaw notice enforcement, or the ticketing system that we have, we are in the process of getting letters out to people that have zoning bylaw infraction. I think I've mentioned in the past, we have about 25 of those right now. So trying to work towards that compliance, and then just getting out the general, we're going to mail out a pamphlet and put some ads in the newspaper. And I expect we will be getting some more, we'll be getting some more complaints because of that. And again, we'll keep the board up to date. And just in summary, I just want to note that this report really only addresses the electoral area, so some electoral area director services, and doesn't include the support that planning staff have provided to regional planning and other services, or that any of the individual director projects that we have. So just as well, by way, I think there's some probably for each electoral area. But example, there's the Sprout Lake sweep and the Banfield parking that planning staff and other staff within the organization are dealing with, and that was the intent of this. And I think that is enough for now, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. And I would like some confirmation that the board, if you are in agreement with how we're proposing to deal with short-term vacation rentals. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that. Something about the vacation rentals right at the end. Can't hear you. You're muted.
Missed the button. Sorry, I just wanted confirmation that either we're on the right track with vacation rentals and bringing some of those back to the board, or alternate direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Roberts.
Yeah, thanks for that. And through the chair to Mr. Erg. When these complaints come up, are we getting copies forwarded to the elected area directors on any of these items?
So what we do when we get an official bylaw enforcement complaint, sort of our first letter is, dear, whoever owns your property owner, we've received a complaint. We want to hear your side of the story first, and then we will then forward that letter to the area director. So yes, we do.
Is there anything further? Any further questions? Director McNabb?
So on the bylaw enforcement portion of it, I'm just wondering about what I would call jeopardy. If somebody is, if a complaint is put forward in the status that we currently are, where we don't have ticketing, and then our ticketing is brought in, does that complaint that was put forward under the old system become enforceable under the new system, or do we have to start from scratch?
No, it's enforceable under the old system, and part of what we're doing is we're notifying those cases right now. That's the 25 that I was mentioning. So we're sending letters to those people right now saying, you still have a bylaw. There's still a bylaw infraction. We have a ticketing bylaw coming in. Here's your chance to get it resolved. Talk to us about how you're going to resolve it. So yeah, I guess the short answer is no. We don't have to get another new complaint. It's still a bylaw complaint that's coming. It's just one more tool we have.
Mr. Holmes?
So just to clarify though, Mike, then we could, if it's still not resolved, then we could use the new regime to start ticketing that property as well, because the bylaw complaint is the bylaw complaint. The bylaw enforcement notice isn't predicated on a complaint received after the enactment of bylaw enforcement notice.
That's correct, yes.
Thanks. So we can use both tools.
Director Roberts?
Yeah, just so if we were to carry forward with it and issue a ticket and you get failure to resolve that through the ticketing process, in other words, they don't pay, is it enforceable by the courts?
Yes, yes, we could still go through the process we've always used and bring it to the board and proceed with legal action and either seek a court injunction or the fine through the court.
Thank
The
you.
injunction's always been staff's recommendation because it's just the most effective.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. McNabb, Director, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. So the second thing I had was, and I'm not sure who's taking care of this, but the social procurement bylaw. So is that planning that's taking that or somebody else?
That's as part of our purchasing policy, and so that'll probably be Terry leading that, and so she's been attending a number of education pieces on that, but so that's in the works, but it's not front and center yet.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I'd move to receive the report.
I'll second Director Shannon.
Okay, thank you. And is there any further comments? Hearing none.
Oh, no, sorry.
Director Shannon?
Thank you. I just have a question when it comes to when we're doing ads for public hearings, et cetera, now with COVID. Is the newspaper still doing a paper copy or is that all online right now?
There's still a paper copy gets sent out as well, or available.
Okay. Obviously, my mailbox is getting cleaned out before I get there every time then. Thanks.
Is there any further comments, questions? Director Bodnar?
Yes, so when this all goes into effect, then will the public be aware of this ahead of time to know that we have more tools to work with?
Yes, yes. We're also going to do a bulk mail out to all of the all the residents in the electoral areas, and I'm going to put some ads in the newspaper.
Is there anything further? Hearing none. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, then this is carried. Thank you. So we have also a report, bylaw options for enforcement and fines.
So we missed page 12 and 13.
Page 12 and 13. That was part of the, on my agenda, it says Community Works Funds Project.
Can I jump in? That letter was from March 3rd from a previous meeting, just for background information.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we're on to reports, bylaw option for enforcement and fines, bylaw PS 1008. Mr. Erg, I'd imagine that's you again.
Yes. Sorry, just scrolling back down, getting there. So again, at the last board meeting, we adopted this bylaw, and so the ticketing or fines will apply through the zoning bylaw. And we were asked to bring back basically the laundry list of other bylaws that could be attached to bylaw PS 1008. And so that list is attached as Appendix A on this report. And I would just also note that you know, as this is a new system for staff, for the directors, and for the community as a whole, you know, I want to make sure that we roll this out right, and get a handle on it, which was why we recommended starting with the zoning bylaw. And what our intention is we will report back in 6 months on what's working, what's not working. I'm sure I will have conversations with lots of you about specific files, between now and then. But again, the intention is to report back to the board and then give options for, what do we want to do with other types of infractions, whether it's the sign bylaw around billboards or other things. And there's a whole bunch of different components. We have a couple of bylaws that are quite that were adopted in either the late 60s or early 70s. We can still enforce them through this bylaw, but they really should be updated. So the unsightly premises and the soil removal bylaw are a couple of examples. Unsightly premises we do use, but I think it needs to be I would recommend it's updated as well. And we can do those things in conjunction. I think a whole work plan needs to come back to the board for 2021 on those things. And then also, getting a sense of what kinds of complaints. Once we start ticketing, are we going to get complaints outside of the zoning bylaw? And then also the other thing that was attached to this report, and it came up just a few minutes ago, was the process. So I did attach as Appendix B just a process with the ticketing included. So just for your information on how we would do that. So happy to answer any other questions or any questions anybody has about this or specific bylaws.
Director Shannon.
Thank you. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to thank you for the report, and I'm happy to move that we receive it, and that I agree that starting lightly and giving everybody, the community staff and all of us, time to kind of get rolling and then add others at a later date is a great approach. Thank you.
Director Bodnar, you next.
Thank you. So we will have time for more input then of this bylaw 1008 and go into more detail, like one of the suggestions whether we could maybe have fines for burning, illegal burning. So that would come up at a later time. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll be reporting back in about 6 months and getting further direction.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything further? I have a question about the process for updating these bylaws. So is that part of the work plan for 2020?
Just quickly checking the strategic priorities that I have on my wall here. I think there's a general bylaw review. I don't think we had picked out anything specific. And I think that my intention would be to include that when we report back on the other bylaws at the end of the year, beginning of January.
Okay, so that means that you would start in January, or it would be part of the work plan for 2021?
The intention would be to be part of the work plan for 2021, and if that's what the board decides.
Right. So I'm just looking at the process, thinking that some of these would be very great to have in place sooner than later. Considering the things like noise control bylaw and dangerous dogs, just two to be. So if they don't require updating, could we possibly include those at the beginning of the year then, and work on the other bylaws that need updating?
Absolutely. And that's something we could do. We could include bylaw 10 soil removal right now. It's just recognizing it was adopted in 1969. That's all. Most of the other bylaws are fairly current. So the noise bylaws and the dangerous dog bylaws, those are all fairly current bylaws. We haven't adopted the open burning or the wood stove bylaws yet. So if they are adopted, they would obviously be very current. So yeah, and all of this would be included when we report back to the board.
Okay, so going forward then with just the zoning bylaw would be the recommendation. And I'm just hoping that once we've got the 6 months forward, moving ahead, that we can start adopting other bylaws right away and identify by that time which bylaws need some updating.
Absolutely, and yeah, that's the intent of sort of getting the feedback right now, is looking for, you know, where do the directors, you know, wish to go with this, and want to confirm sort of we're on the same page.
Okay, Director Bodnar.
So what I'm hearing is something like burning regulations would have to wait to 6 months before we entertain that subject.
Well, that's how the bylaw was set up. So I guess with the burning bylaw specifically, we need to finalize the public input and bring it back to the board so it could be adopted. So that bylaw has to be adopted first. The direction that the board passed, or the resolution the board passed 2 weeks ago, was to go with the zoning bylaw, and then for us to report back in 6 months. And then, you know, the other part of that was to come back with a list of what can be included.
Right.
Director Roberts.
So if I may, through the chair, to Mr. Erg, and this may help Director Bodnar, I'm not sure. If Flynn Row comes out again with restrictions on open burning, which they probably will at some point, currently, would any of the bylaw officers have the ability or authority to deal with those issues in the valley at this time?
Sorry, I want to make sure I get this right. Only in a support capacity with Flynn Row unless we have our burning bylaws adopted. So if we have our burning bylaws adopted, then we have the ability to enforce those.
Thank you.
Is there anything else from the directors or staff? Is someone prepared to make the recommendation?
I believe Director Shannon made that recommendation in her comments, and I would be happy to second it.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so is there anyone opposed to this recommendation? Okay, then that's carried. Thank you. Next. Scroll back, sorry. Is there any late business? Hearing none, then it's time to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by
Second.
Director Shannon. Thank you all. And we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you.